This is a picture of one of the DJs from a local radio station, and I'm going to work on editing his skin. Now, I created an action, a frequency separation action. I called it Ultimate Skin Retouch because that's really what it is. And so what it is it separates the image into two layers, one that adjusts color without really affecting the texture, and one that affects the texture without really affecting the color. And so you'll see there's two layers here in this action, texture layer and a tone layer. And I used to do it the opposite and take out all the blemishes and then work on the tone, but I found that it's a lot more effective and faster and even easier to go ahead and work on the tone first. And so what you do is you click where you see the color of the skin that you like. You want all this to be that color, and you want to get it similar because of shadows and light. You want to be in a similar area. And so, and you can, to make it more natural, you go with like a lower flow. I just set the opacity at 100% and adjust the flow. But you can go at a lower flow to make it real smooth, or you can go with a higher flow to make it faster. So if you're using, doing a lot of space all at one time, sometimes it's better to go ahead and go with a higher flow. And you'll see his skin has a lot of acne. And so what we're doing is we are just making the color uniform. And you'll see the texture's still there. But we will work on that next. So right now we're taking the anger out of the blemishes. Just kind of give them all the same basic color. And sometimes you'll hit a spot when you're selecting a color and all of a sudden it's so much darker or lighter than you expect. And really, you got to remember you're selecting just pixels of color, small pixels of color. And so I just keep selecting. Excuse me. Just keep working that skin. Now, his skin's worse than most. This is one of those situations where you know you're going to be working on it a while, especially if you want it to look natural. And that's always my goal, is to make it look as natural as possible. I don't want anyone to ever look touched up or plastic. That's one of my big pet peeves, is when people basically just blur everything. So many filters that are on phones and stuff now, that's all they do, is they locate the eyes, and sometimes the nose, sometimes they can't even find the nose, and they mask those out to where those things aren't affected, and then they just blur the heck out of the skin, and the skin looks so plastic, and people are getting so used to seeing that now that that's starting to be what looks normal and natural to them, and it's a little bit scary to me. I've seen too many pictures on social media where it just, excuse me, bumped the wrong button. What I'm doing is I'm holding down the Alt button to use the color selection tool. So I just select a different color, a different tone using that. Anyway, I've just seen so many pictures on social media where their nose disappears straight up. They look like a plastic face with no nose. It is an interesting thing. And like I said, it's becoming so commonplace that people don't even notice that that's what they look like anymore. They don't really realize that that is not a natural look. Of course, not everybody's going to spend time photoshopping either. Okay, so we've just adjusted the tone here so far. And you'll see, like, it's much improved. But we've still got a lot of blemishes to work through. So that's where the texture comes in. And so we'll use the clone stamp, and we're going to play with the texture. Now, he's got good texture up here. So make sure the check is out of the block under aligned. And you just select a sample of skin that looks good, and you click on all the skin that doesn't. And because we've already evened out the tone a lot, we're going to need to do very little with that once we get back to evening out the tone. We'll go do another pass of tone evening. And see, you can see like his skin has pores over here, you know. And not that anybody wants big pores, but it looks natural. Skin has pores. It should have pores. That's one of the things about skin. Crazy as it is, it has pores. And so if you take all that away, if you take the pores away, then it looks like plastic. We do not want plastic skin. It's one of my pet peeves about too much foundation is it also looks plastic in pictures. Again, I know we don't want big pores, but we want skin, right? Can we all agree on skin? And see, I like taking a good sample of the skin in the area that we're working, because we all have like larger pores around our nose, but you know, medium-sized pores on our forehead. But then like our cheeks, that's going to be typically, unless it's like up high on your cheekbones, going to be smaller pores. And so you don't want to put giant pores somewhere there's like small pores, and you don't want to put small pores somewhere there's big pores, or it looks inconsistent. You want a certain amount of continuity. Now you'll see, even though we're cleaning up the blemishes, because of the degree of the blemishes, we're still going to need to come back and clean up the tone a little bit. Notice how I'm clicking and getting some of this skin texture. And you got to be careful, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally pick up an area that has the blemishes and clone that right over the top of an area that you're trying to clean blemishes off of. I know the quality on these videos isn't usually that great, so it can be a little hard to tell that you can see his pores, but you can see his pores if you zoom way in, and that's good. Got to be especially careful with men and their beards, their shave lines. Because another thing you don't want to do is smooth out what should be whiskers. Gotta let these gentlemen keep their whiskers. Alright, let's scan his face over here by his lips. And then over here by his nose. When you're working on someone and there's a lot of blemishes, you'll notice you'll miss a lot more, and then when you come back, you're like, how did I miss that? Well, it's real easy when it gets kind of lost in the mess. Okay. Clean up that hair too. So here we are so far. Get rid of those. Looking good. No, his tone's still not super even, so we're going to go back and work on the tone a little bit more. I like to not zoom in too close because you're looking at an overall effective tone here. So when you're doing your final tone editing, I like to kind of stay zoomed out a little bit. Get his lip. You'll notice I sample the skin from both sides because on one side it's a little bit darker. Than the other, because it's getting more light from one side than the other. hit undo on that. Sometimes I get a little ahead of myself and have to step back. You can Control Z to take a back step. Now let's look at him. Well, look at that handsome guy up here. I want you to notice his nose looks a little too sharp. It's rounder in the before picture, rounder looking, and that is sometimes because we get a little carried away with our toning, our lightening, and our darkening. Okay, so we'll round that out a little bit. And you can go back and look and be like, oh, yeah, that's way better. Now, let's do a little bit of contouring. We'll do this on even the tone. Dark. For men especially, it's nice to go along the bottom of the jawline. Kind of emphasize that a little bit. You can go a little on the edges. Don't go too much under the cheekbone. You start to make him look like he's wearing blush, and, you know, men aren't trying to be wearing blush. But basically, just lightening and darkening, highlights and shadows. Now we're light and a little dodging. I like to go over the eyes a little bit. Look at that. There is our before and after this guy's skin.